this week we were expecting a lot of news, especially on the US dollar. And as we are selling the US dollar for the past couple of weeks, I think about 4 or 5 weeks, we were selling off the US dollar. And I talked about the correlation between gold and the US dollar, how the US dollar shoots up to all-time highs while the US dollar was heading for all-time lows. This week there was a lot of US dollar news, and it had the potential to change the direction of the US dollar. Essentially, we were looking for reversal entries on the US dollar pairs, pushed by the news of the interest rates, housing rates. There was also the issue of the stimulus packages. And in the past, stimulus packages, when they were introduced into the US, we actually saw the US dollar fall. But as I had said prior, that with the euro, it did the opposite. With the euro, when interests were lowered to like negative rates, we actually saw the euro recover. And when they added the billions and stimulus package, we actually saw the euro shoot up. So that's essentially what we saw. And I think the US dollar saw the impact that had on the euro, and they introduced a new stimulus package. And that created the news from these past few days, and that ultimately reversed the trend for the US dollar. Now, before we look into it, obviously, these are my US dollar entries, right? This was the entry, and I'll get into it just now. These are the entry for the US dollar. I want to break down because this is important, and then ultimately the rand, because I've always spoken highly about the rand. And can you imagine, we pushed up all the way from these lows. This was my entry, pushed down from all these lows, and we're currently here. This is my target right here. Similar to the euro rand, nothing's changed there. But what's interesting is the US dollar MXN, the buy on it. So before we look at it closely, I want you to see a picture of this, because if you see it on the charts first, it may look confusing. So let me show you a picture of the pattern we were seeing. So on the US dollar MXN, this is the pattern we are seeing. It's called the descending broadening wedge, right? And what essentially is, it's a type of unique wedge, and we see price falling down in this wedge-like pattern, right? And so in the past weeks, this was what was forming on the US dollar pairs. If you were looking carefully, this was the wedge that was falling on the US dollar pairs. And ultimately on Tuesday or Wednesday, we were here, right, at the support of the wedge, and we're looking for buy opportunities, obviously in line with the fundamentals, and the fundamentals would have been driving the price. So this is where we're looking for entry. This is the target. Now let's see what's on the US dollar MXN, because the exact same descending broadening wedge is on the US dollar MXN, and that was the entry I want us to look at, right? So this was around Tuesday or Wednesday if we zoom in. But before we zoom in, you can see this is the wedge I was talking about. Here's the wedge, here's the wedge. But things are never going to be perfect, right? So if you were expecting price to touch the support of the wedge like the picture, it tends to not happen that way. It's very messy. It's like this rising wedge. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to look very distorted because of all the movements happening. So things aren't always going to be perfect, but if you rely on certain patterns, you'll be fine. So for example, even though we didn't touch these lows, we saw a falling wedge, right? That's what signaled to us that we're about to reverse. Falling wedge is a reversal pattern, by the way. And you could have done this two ways. You could have used either the falling wedge or market cycles. So here was the falling wedge, here was the huge downtrend. And with falling wedges, they reversed the trend. So this was the falling wedge, price is trapped within this falling wedge, and then it breaks out. And then as it breaks out, you enter, right? So you could have entered it as a falling wedge, right? And then let it run, let it run, let it run. Or you could have entered it as a market cycle, right? So let me just show you what the market cycle is. So I forgot who coined the term the market cycle, but essentially he noticed that the market moves in cycles. So when a downtrend starts or when an uptrend starts, you will find that there's certain key things to look for to get into a market cycle move. So it starts off with a W formation, right? So here was the first leg of the W, and then here was the second leg of the W. And remember, this is at a support level. So, and as I've always said, you never enter at the support. You wait for it to break and then you enter. So here was the W. Ignore the falling wedge if you were going to trade this as a market cycle trade. So here was the first leg of the W. Here was the second leg of the W, and then price broke out. So either you could have traded as a breakout of the W for the market cycle, or as the falling wedge. And then this area here was the Asian session yesterday evening, right? Asian sessions usually consolidation, price doesn't do much, but it's a great opportunity to add positions. So I did add um, two more positions here, right? Because what happens at consolidation, think of consolidation as price being trapped. And when price is trapped, it's going to break out. Now, if we've already seen this huge W to tell us that a new trend is forming, and we've seen this falling wedge telling us a new trend is forming, then obviously there's a bias to the upside that we're going to break out to the upside. And as you can see, my entries there, price broke up to the upside. Here's where you want to be careful. I think also there's a bit of manipulation that happens at consolidation areas. You will find funny looking candlesticks. Look at how long this candlestick was. So even if you had added a position, you had to be very careful with your stops. I actually put my stops lower than here, lower than this entry, because I knew something funny was going to happen at this consolidation area. They usually have funny looking wicks. And if you add the line graph, you actually find that it's a nice consolidation, but the funny looking wicks actually knock people's stop losses. So be careful at that. And this was a push up. And then obviously we'd expect a bit of a pullback to the support area or this 89 moving average. And then if you want, you can add another position to push up. And from our picture, the target we'd be looking for. Now you could have targeted this area here after consolidation. So after consolidation here, you could have added more and then just taken profit here completely and gotten out. I am targeting, like the picture, I am targeting, can't really see the line, 22.88100. That's my target. Like the picture, depending on how it plays out, but essentially that's my target. And then hopefully maybe price will fall back down. But that's pretty much it.